Welcome back to our panel discussion, Digital Modernization in DoD's Fourth Estate, sponsored by Leidos, here on Federal News Network. My guest today, Pat Flanders, the Chief Information Officer at the Defense Health Agency, Frank Konechny, the Chief Technology Officer at the Air Force, Jamie Markole, the Chief Information Officer at the Defense Contract Audit Agency, Don Means is the Defense Enclave Services Executive at the Defense Information Systems Agency, Danielle Metz is Principal Director for the Deputy Chief Information Officer for Information Enterprise at the Defense Department, and Doug Jones is the Chief Technology Officer of the Defense Group at Leidos. And in this gigantic 5-year effort to consolidate and optimize and improve and lower the cost of, by the way, of the infrastructure supporting the Fourth Estate, it seems to me that one of the biggest issues is getting it done through the people that you have. And so there's a lot of human capital, cultural changes, maybe a cliche, but I think it's a real phenomenon. So Don, why don't we start with you? What are the human capital, organizational, and programmatic issues and challenges that you see to making sure this goes and moves apace?
Yes, I actually think that, programmatically and technically, that, there may be some small challenges that we'll be able to overcome. But I think on the human capital side, that is actually the greatest asset. We can't do any of this without the people. And, it's going to be a change, for some of the agencies, changing the logo, but in and of itself, even though you might be doing the same job, can be traumatic. And I think things like having town halls and over communicating with people to make sure that they understand what their role is in the bigger picture, how they're going to be supporting the same mission requirements. It will be important to make sure that they're able to provide the services that they're very good at providing. So I think that the human capital side of it is going to be a challenge just from just because change is hard and it's going to be different.
Frank, I imagine there's just issues with everyone speaking the same language because it may vary across different agencies. I think that happens even within the Air Force across the different bureaus and pieces.
Well, it's interesting because every Air Force base is unique into itself. And so this is like the Fourth Estate is the same way, exactly. And so when you talk about consolidation and everything else, it's the same issues. You have cultural issues, you have, I want this because I'm doing this, And so depending on your mission that you have, it has to be adjusted. And you have to understand when you combine everybody together, you have a bunch of people who have different missions and have different needs. And this is one of the problems. It's not vanilla across the board. It's pretty much, a mix of things. And when you combine them together, you have to realize that and understand that when somebody says, my mission is blah and it's important, you're going to hear that 30 times. And they all are important.
Sure. Danielle, is that part of the thinking that has gone into this? I mean, do you take this into account in planning this effort?
Oh, absolutely. I think the first step is to ensure that you create a collaborative environment, a forum for the dialogue to take place. And so that each of these DAFAs has an ability to be a part of the solution. They see themselves represented in the strategy moving forward, and you have buy-in at different echelons. It also requires to have persistent, dedicated leadership. And this is an enduring effort. Reform needs to be constant. And so therefore you have to make sure that you have leadership in each echelon that is pushing this forward. And as Don said, that you're over communicating. I don't think there's a problem with over communication. You have to be able to vocalize and also listen, and then be able to create that dialogue. Technology is easy. People are hard, and that's okay. But you need to be able to create the safe space for them to be able to communicate and for you to listen so they can see themselves represented in the strategy that you're putting forward.
And Pat, having made a lot of change already within what is a very large and diverse agency, do you worry about having to go over ground you've already gone over? And how do you deal with what your people are telling you as you go through all these multiple projects, including your participation in this particular Fourth Estate effort?
So that's one of the reasons I come in towards the end. And so this is a very real thing, right? So when you subsume something, so I got an Air Force thing an Army thing, a Navy thing, and I already had a TRICARE management activity thing. So I own 4 of everything, right? And so there's 4 sets of people for everything. Well, in the Army, a lot of their workforce is government. In the Navy, you have the same people doing those jobs, but they're contractors. And in the Air Force, you've got more military. That's all got to be worked out when you migrate 4 into 1, along with the contracts, because we'll pick a facility that's 80% contractor and 20% government. Well, you can almost outsource all of the commodity IT there because it's 80% contractor. But if it's the other way around and they only have, say, 2 out of 10 people that are contractors, those contractors are not going to go in there and tell those good government people how to do business. They're going to augment and help them. And so all of that stuff, and it's by site, by location, very important, got to be worked out. And we're doing it. We're about 70% through it for the medical stuff.
Sure. Well, Jamie, why don't you comment from the standpoint of the DCAA, because you are dealing with all of those different makeups in the agency's contracts that you do audit and so forth. So how do you handle that kind of thing now?
Well, in terms of cultural change for DCAA, I look at it in two angles. And we do have a mix of both government and contractor IT people performing our services. But I look at it, I'm always focused on the end state customer, which is our auditor workforce. I'm hoping it's relatively seamless for them. They just want capability. They want to be able to do their job. And with the consolidation of tool sets that's likely to occur once we have a single service provider, we may have to make some adjustments in terms of training employees. They're going to have to be adaptable to potentially using a new capability that replaces what they're comfortable with. But I think that will happen and not be too much of a burden. I think where my biggest challenge is with my own internal IT organization, we're going to suffer the brunt of the change. We have a large percentage of our government staff will be transitioning to DISA, per design. And those folks have concerns about, what their new organizational structure will look like, what their new responsibilities will be, who's their new supervisor, normal human concerns that people would have. And then the remaining people that I have post DISA migration, we're going to cover down and focus on our mission systems, which is a good thing. The challenge is many of the folks I have on the gov side span both mission and commodity IT. And so how do I separate them, retrain them? It's going to cause some challenges, all overcomable, but I think we'll have more difficulties adapting on the IT side than our agency at large. At least that's my hope.
Yeah, Doug, it seems like that's one of the challenges also from a vendor standpoint is you do have the mission systems that vary greatly, and yet the commodity IT in theory, at least, it doesn't matter if it matches all across these different small sub enterprises because the functions are exactly the same. So how do you approach that one?
It is a challenge, and we look at this from a mission IT and commodity IT because they come together, right? In the end, we use a lot of that sort of commodity IT to make decisions that are critical to the mission, right? And the data goes across them as we're doing that situational awareness. So, it is that balancing act as we go across. I think ultimately some of the key challenges we have, as Danielle said, it's less about the tech and more about the people and the culture and making sure we have effective collaboration, that the agencies involved have a voice in terms of the capabilities they get. And the other thing is that customer experience. How do you ensure we're still getting that customer satisfaction to the user community, that they feel their needs are being met when you're optimizing and consolidating these capabilities into a central place? That's the big fear we've seen on the commercial side. We've seen other agencies as we do consolidation is still making sure that they feel that they're getting their needs met. And people know when someone calls that they understand the priority based upon that org and where they're coming from, because you don't know their mission necessarily because you're a large organization supporting a massive pool of people. How do you know how to prioritize those pieces, and that this isn't just someone calling to get an access fixed? They're a doctor that needs their access fixed so they can get something done, or they are an auditor that's at a field audit that needs that support. So how do you balance those pieces of the challenges? And that's where I think we can partner with the government and industry to make sure that we're bringing that best of breed solutions to bear for that.
Yeah, Danielle, it strikes me that one good crucible for this is the help desk. You mentioned that there were 35 of them across these different enterprises, and you'd like to consolidate that to a single help desk. And that seems like almost where all of the issues would be concentrated, because the help desk has to support this broad range of services, and the help desks themselves may have operated totally differently coming together in this. So maybe expound on that one.
Certainly. So the idea is that DISA did a contract award to, it's a global service center contract. And the idea is that DISA is going first. So DISA is consolidating a lot of their service help desks that they have internal to DISA, whether it's supporting DISA itself or DISA as the enterprise service provider for the DoD. We have 13 organizations that would follow suit. And the idea is that as part of the civilian transfer piece, instead of having those individual folks who were manning those individual service desks, they would transition to DISA. So that now, instead of focusing on individual piece parts of the network, you're now focusing on servicing the new DoD network for the DAFAs. So it goes hand in hand in terms of making sure that you have the contract in place, that you have all the right tools in place and the services to be consolidated, optimized, and then the people piece follow after that. And so that is a very methodical approach. So as the networks are being optimized into the new network, so too will 6 days before that happens, the civilians would transfer to DISA. So we try to be to create a strategy where it would make sense. And we took a lot of input from the DAFAs before we finalized that and put those implementation plans into work.
So Don, you probably won't be giving out your personal number to all the people that might be calling the help desk, but I wanted to ask you about something we mentioned earlier, and that is agencies that may have made some optimization and transfers already, and the need might be to change what they've already changed. I'm thinking in terms of cloud. As DISA has helped teach the world, cloud migrations are a lot more complicated, take a lot more planning than simply switching over the lift and shift type of workload model that everybody thought we would have 10 years ago. And so a lot of agencies have done the heavy work of establishing cloud provisioning contracts at different levels, the infrastructure level, the hosting level, and so on. How do you see the possibility of retaining what they've already done in this new regime that's coming?
Well, I think part of that it goes back to communication with the different agencies and field activities to make sure that whatever they're building is consistent with the technical approach and where we're heading. And Pat can attest to this. We provide a multitude of forums to make sure that we're hand in glove, because the worst thing that could happen is for investment or build out to happen in a direction that we don't intend to go. And so again, through Danielle, through our current senior staff at DISA, we're making sure that we're having a close partnership with all the CIOs and directors, so that we're all have the same sight picture and we're all marching towards a convergence and not divergence. It's one of the big lessons learned going forward. I did want to touch on the help desk piece of things, because ultimately that's the part that I really get excited about. I want to help enable a better user experience for just the average user for each one of these agencies. And I think if we do all this investment and we optimize, yet we have a less productive user experience at the endpoint with simple things like laptops and phones that we really haven't done it right. And so I'm really excited about that piece of it. We really would love it to end up in a place where this is not only exhibiting best practices, but also has created a much more productive user experience across the entire fourth estate, where you're not stuck with a piece of broken equipment that we can quickly turn it around, or where you'll be able to go anywhere on the fourth estate and use your equipment, because ultimately it is one network.
Yeah, Doug, I wanted to ask you that question also. Should and is it possible and efficacy to have an endpoint strategy as kind of the final piece of all of this consolidation and optimization? Because if someone wants to put their Game Boy on the network, then you got a problem.
Wow, I think we all just dated ourselves there. But yeah, I completely agree. I think the endpoint strategy is absolutely critical because in the end, that's where the rubber meets the road from a user experience, from a security perspective. So it's absolutely critical to have that. Now we have to have flexibility there. We can't say everyone's going to use this model laptop, period, right? Because there's different needs and different modes out there. But I think as Don was bringing up, we have to make sure we have that user experience where we're able to get them the tools they need to do their job. But I think some standardization and optimization around that, around personas that we would see out in the normal workforce in terms of the types of demands they need, whether it's a desktop, whether it's a laptop, whether it's classified versus unclassed, and things like the amount of CPU need if you're doing like engineering modeling and sim type stuff, like over at DARPA they may be doing. Those are going to be a little bit different configurations, but I think going to a standardization, the imaging, the collaboration tools, and the security are going to be really powerful to give that user experience Don was talking about, to give you portability across the network so you can go into other places, and to give you an improved buying power from our ability at the overall fourth estate level, I think will be really powerful and allow us to also have better resiliency because we'll have some standardization so we can be able to get you return to service much faster because it's better able to stock sort of backups and be able to jump in and give you a new resource if you need it from a loaner perspective.
All right, I think we're going to have to end on that note. We are out of time, but I'm glad we were able to cover everything from the cloud to the endpoint today and everything in between. I want to thank today's guests, Pat Flanders, the Chief Information Officer at the Defense Health Agency, Frank Konechny, the Chief Technology Officer at the Air Force, Jamie Markole, the Chief Information Officer at the Defense Contract Audit Agency, Don Means is the Defense Enclave Services Executive at the Defense Information Systems Agency, Danielle Metz is Principal Director for the Deputy Chief Information Officer for Information Enterprise at the Defense Department, and Doug Jones is the Chief Technology Officer of the Defense Group at Leidos. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. You're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com. Use the search term Leidos.